Hello, and thank you for joining me on Space Monkey Space. I'm Space Monkey. We're right now in the middle of September, and we are also in the midst of a months-long writers' strike, WGA strikes, and SAG, Screen Actors Guild Award strike. So, um, MCU wise, we're affected because it has put a hold on whatever projects were either being were in principal photography or were being written to get ready to put into production. Um, Daredevil Born Again and Deadpool 3 are two other ones that were in the midst of production and were halted because of the strikes. I'm sure Thunderbolts got affected, and a lot of the TV shows. Agatha probably was affected. Um, so there's not much happening right now, other than a lot of rumors from different different scoopers and uh, what I call the scoop wars. Like there's people insulting themselves over what the proper scoop is, what the right one is, and who's copying whose stuff. So I don't that stuff I don't listen to. But so there's nothing really going on right now in the MCU as far as confirmation from sets. So I thought it was a good time to just really briefly go over what my understanding of the multiverse and timelines and stuff is in the MCU, because a lot of people are complaining. One of the biggest complaints right now um, about how Phase 5 is going, Phase 4 into Phase 5, how that's going is a lot of it's hard to understand. I don't get, why would they have to bring in multiverse? That doesn't make any sense. It's too complicated. They're not explaining it right. Well, the way I the way I understand it is what makes sense to me is the following. I'm gonna break it down for you. Just what makes it make sense to me. Like I'm not, a genius on any level, but it makes sense to me. This is the way I look at it. It makes sense. I'm not confused at all. Every time I watch a show or a movie, I know what's going on as far as where the timeline is and the multiverse and all that stuff, right? So let's start where we start with this discussion is on the timeline is actually a place that's out of time. It's the Citadel, the Citadel at the end of time. It's which is the that fortress where on the season finale of Loki season one, Loki and Sylvie encounter He Who Remains in the Citadel at the end of time, and we start there because He Who Remains is a variant of Kang, and I'm not sure if he's the original. We don't know that yet, but he's a Kang, and he's the one that's in charge of our timeline. He's put himself in charge really, but he's the one. So what? Okay, let me break it down from another angle really quick. Let's pretend this is our timeline or the MCU timeline, right? Yeah, 0 BC or whatever, 5 BC to 2023. Okay, this is our timeline. And if a branch was to occur, it would branch off. And then that's what's being pruned by the TVA so that it just remains like this. So this is Earth 616. That's where the MCU has been since Iron Man came out in 2008. And every every universe is one of these. It's a timeline. Ours is 616. What we saw in Multiverse of Madness was universe was 838, right? We're 616. They were 838, and they have their own. I don't have another pencil, but um, they have their own timeline. Okay, so they have their own Kang, their own He Who Remains in that timeline. We're just dealing with ours right now. Okay, so this is where we are. Where Loki used the Tesseract during Avengers Endgame. Um, that was a spot on this timeline, and when he used it, he caused a branch out of this timeline, and that's why. the TVA appeared at the beginning of Loki season 1 and arrested Loki and pruned that timeline so that no branches come off of this timeline. That's what He Who Remains was making sure just stayed the way it is. Just the timeline stays straight. Um, the stuff in Universe 838 is not at all affected by our timeline. They have their own thing going on. It's not affected at all, unless what happened in Multiverse of Madness happens, which shouldn't happen, but it happened, and he was transported by America Chavez from our universe to theirs. So then it affects it. But if no one ever travels between between universes, then that shouldn't be a problem. But because it happened, then there were issues, right? That's why multiversal beings are so rare. America Chavez is one. We see that Wanda now is one. So yeah, so that's our timeline. When Sylvie killed He Who Remains, you saw all the branches coming out of this timeline. There's only one main timeline that they show behind He Who Remains' dead body at the end of Loki, and that's the one that's branching out into different timelines. What's a different timeline? How does that differ from a different multiverse, from a different universe? It's called the multiverse because there's many different universes, and each one has their Kang, has their version of Kang, and that's why we saw that stadium filled with different Kangs at the end of Quantumania, because that's one Kang from each timeline. Okay? So, example, if at the end of Avengers Endgame, if Steve Rogers had not gone back to the spots where they took those Infinity Stones from, those were branches, because the main timeline had been disrupted by taking those stones away and taken back in time or wherever they were taken. So he had to go back and put those stones there. By putting the stones back where they got them from, that pruned the alternate timelines that were created by taking them in the first place. So that's why 616 remained the same. People call 616 Earth 199999 now, because it still hasn't been explicitly stated, but the moment the timeline got fractured at the end of Loki, it switched from 616 to 199999. But again, I'm not going to go into that because I'm not sure that's actually the case. So yeah, if Steve Rogers had not put back the let's say if he hadn't gone back to Asgard, right, during Thor: The Dark World, which is where they took the ether from, and Mjolnir, so he had to go back and put two things back. So if he hadn't gone back there, there would be no ether existing in that timeline. It would have already branched. There would be no Mjolnir for that Thor to possess. So he had to go back and do it, because their new timeline that was created would have had no Mjolnir and no ether in it, no reality stone. And that's just creating a branch, and we don't want that to happen. They don't want to mess with time and timelines and all that. So he put it back, pruned that. Now Thor has his hammer back, and the ether is back where it should be. Okay, another thing that could have happened was he would have gone back and not given the Ancient One back the time stone. That would have been a whole different prune where Doctor Strange never gets the Mind Stone. Who knows what would have happened at that? The Time Stone. Who knows what would have happened at that point, right? Because in Endgame, the Ancient One gave the Time Stone to Bruce Banner so that he could use it to, to bring everybody back from the blip, right? So she knew it. So she gave it to him with the understanding that their timeline was going to change at that point, but she had confidence that he'd come back with it. Once once Bruce took her time stone in that timeline, in that new alternate timeline without the time stone, Doctor Strange would never have had the time stone. He never would have had that. So that would have been very different if Thanos had attacked. Okay? No time stone here because it was taken away. That's an alternate timeline. That's the stuff that you see branching out of the timeline at the end of Loki. And that's all just on timeline of Earth 616. If that had happened in Earth 838, they'd have their own sets of branches coming out of their timeline. That their Loki. I don't even think that timeline had a He Who Remains that was guarding their branches, from happening. So we won't even go into that because they haven't said anything about that particular universe. Then I'm hearing that they do go back to that universe in the Marvels, but we'll see. I'm hoping they do because that's great to me. But anyway, so that's what a timeline is. A timeline is just where the MCU is happening. In 2008, on the Earth timeline 616, in 2008, Tony Stark got kidnapped and came back and became Iron Man. And then the Avengers happened, and then Avengers Age of Ultron happened, Sokovia destroyed, and then everything else. That's all 616. Okay? We don't know what happened on Earth 838 to make it so that they had an Illuminati with Reed Richards and Professor Xavier and their own version of Carol Danvers, which was Maria Rambeau and Captain Carter. Yeah, that was all. Who knows how that happened? I mean, they have Inhumans there that are led by a king. None of that's been mentioned on Earth 616 yet, so way different timeline. I hope that explains a little bit of it. If you have any questions, just put them in the comments and I'll make a supplemental video to hopefully answer those questions. But to me that makes all the sense in the world, right? We've all just been watching one timeline, and by either Loki or the Avengers messing with the timeline, it's caused branches. Those branches need to be pruned by the TVA, who's being led by He Who Remains, and that's what we see. So now that He Who Remains is dead, you see all the branches coming out of our timeline that's just causing all sorts of different stuff to happen. That is one of the reasons why the fabric, this is mentioned by I believe it's Stephen Strange, the fabric of the universe is lessening because of all these branches, and that's why it's so easy to travel now between universes. The events of Multiverse of Madness more than likely would not have happened if He Who Remains was alive to prune things from occurring that shouldn't have occurred. But because so that movie would never have happened, which many people will probably be thankful for. But if he had not been killed by Sylvie, that stuff doesn't happen. He would have guarded against it. So to me, it makes sense. Hopefully that explains a little bit to you. What we see at the end of Quantumania is every Kang from every timeline. Immortus is the Kang of timeline A, and Ramatut is the Kang from timeline B, and all that, right? So it just makes sense to me. I don't get it. I don't know how people complain about it, but hopefully it helps. Again, I'm more than likely I'm wrong. Because I'm not saying that my theory is the right one, but if I'm right, that'd be awesome because it makes perfect sense to me. If I'm wrong, then I'll go with whatever they say. But as of now, that's what I think is happening, and I hope that helps people get what's going on, and maybe if that helps turn a couple of people who are naysayers into fans of the MCU again, then I've done my job, and that's all I want to do is just have people understand so they can enjoy it the way I enjoy it. So anyway, yeah, these strikes that are going on, I'm not sure how much longer they'll go on. So I'm hoping to do some more videos. I had a busy week, so I didn't get to do a video today. But yeah, I'm hoping to do some more videos. I'm maybe gonna go back and go movie by movie and just explain how it's all leading up to where we are now. Um, that's something that I want to get back into, and just also explain where we are now as far as storyline. Because a lot of people say that there's no connectivity, and I'm going to explain how there is connectivity. Um, so yeah, keep an eye out for those. Please hit like; it helps me. Subscribe to my channel so you can get more of these videos coming. I'm also going to probably do one in the next day or two. We're a couple of days from Ahsoka episode 6, and I wanted to talk a little bit about Ahsoka episode 5. So maybe I'll be doing that hopefully before the next episode comes out. Keep an eye out. I'm Space Monkey. Thank you for joining me on Space Monkey Space, and I hope this video helped. Take care.